Hello and good evening, everyone. Tonight we will be looking into the Black Swan theory. Black Swan events are events that are typically random, unforeseen, and possess a dangerous threat to a corporation's health. In retrospect, the events are usually predictable and have early warning signs. The phrase was derived from an old expression that says, "A good person is as rare as a black swan." What you need to know is up to the 1700s, people thought swans only came in one color, and black ones did not exist. So the saying was equivalent to "a good person is as rare as a flying pig." The discovery of black swans in Australia was shocking and changed our common perception. The theory was developed by Nassim Nicholas Taleb in 2001, and he followed it up with a book in 2007. The main points from his book was not preventing a black swan event from occurring, but to build surrounding safety nets to alleviate a firm's unpredictable losses.
Black swan events cause major disruptions to a supply chain. Modern trends in business practice have also made supply chains far larger than they were previously. Identifying each point within a large supply chain that is affected by a black swan event can be a quite daunting task. For that reason, we have narrowed the scope of a supply chain to three components: an internal supply chain, an external upstream supply chain, and an external downstream supply chain. Firstly, we will be discussing the internal impact of a black swan event on one singular business. For this section, we will be assuming the company being examined is in the center of the supply chain, and the impact of a black swan event will exclude external factors, such as shortcomings caused directly by other partners within their supply chain. Aside from these external factors from other enterprises, there are three main reasons a company may experience a black swan event: their personal practice, economic forces, and environmental forces. Personal practice causing a black swan event would refer to an action that is organized and performed internally for the singular business. Black swan events caused by the practicing party is a somewhat confusing situation for a variety of reasons. By the nature of a black swan event, the activity would be outside of the realm of regular expectations, and the event must be a surprise to the observer. In this case, the company would be the practicing party, and therefore the observer. However, a loose example can be used, especially in the case of Volkswagen's emissions scam in late 2015. Although the example does not perfectly fit the unknown requirements of a black swan event, according to Nassim Taleb, Volkswagen's crisis does offer a view into the effects on their supply chain. Aside from the obvious media and political backlash, Volkswagen's inability to supply proper components had major implications on their supply chain. Moving downward the supply chain, Volkswagen was responsible for compensating the retailers worldwide who carried the recalled models. Due to Volkswagen's size as a company compared to most retailers, there was likely not much change in retailers' willingness to continue purchasing from Volkswagen. However, in a more balanced market, retailers could use previously poor business practices as leverage to demand higher prices. Otherwise, the retailer could choose to buy from another company or simply not offer the product. At the end of the supply chain, consumers held the power to cause serious implications for the manufacturer. In just the United States, Volkswagen is responsible to pay roughly $10 billion in compensation to buyers. And moving forward, consumers could further damage the company by choosing to buy less of the company's products. In the current market, there is far more visibility into companies' business practices. And because of this, companies must choose to conduct themselves as ethically and socially responsible while maximizing profits. Cutting corners can be an easy way to cut costs in the short run, but the long run they often result in comparatively massive costs and a decrease in public opinion. Economic black swan events are best characterized in relation to the recession of 2008 or the Great Depression. Although these events greatly affected all companies at the time, for organizational purposes, we will be discussing them in an internal view of the supply chain at one company. Simply put, an economic black swan event is poisonous for businesses. In both examples of an economic black swan event, The available market for a business is likely diminished because demand will likely decrease for most goods and services. To stay competitive, companies must also lower their prices, which means having to also lower their costs. Using the automobile industry as an example, manufacturers would likely respond to economic downfall by renegotiating prices on materials and components or by finding a cheaper vendor to purchase from to maintain profit margins. Consequently, the shift to a cheaper vendor could likely result in inferior material being used in production. Such a change could increase their production costs due to an increased defect rate, or worse, put the company at risk in the future if the inferior materials result in a defective product. Decisions like this showcase a very small and limited view of the effects of an economic black swan event on businesses across the globe. In general, economic shortcomings force a company into a high-stress restructuring of their practices that is amplified by a decrease in available funds. This restructuring requires a company to perform with adaptability, quickness, and integrity. Black swan events have not only affected business practice when they occur, they have also affected how many businesses conduct business moving forward in anticipation of possible black swan events. Along with other various changes like technology, black swan events have caused an increase in visibility throughout the supply chain. By increasing visibility in their supply chain, a company can mitigate the risk of being directly impacted or associated with a possible black swan event in the future. By knowing exactly what they're buying and from exactly where the product originated from, companies can better assess the quality and reliability. Previously, a bill of material would most likely provide little information about the details of the product being purchased and where it originated from. Modern trends are now moving towards a more visible mapping of products' movement throughout the supply chain, from raw materials all the way to final product on the shelf. Increasing visibility has been integral with innovations in technology. Although implementation increased costs for business initially, improved visibility has allowed companies to save money not only by mitigating risks, but also through the ability to operate more efficiently and cut costs. Conversely, companies who operate very leanly have also been threatened by black swan events to move away from lean management. This does not mean massive companies like Toyota will move away from lean production entirely. Doing so would drastically increase costs to hold inventory and increase the likelihood of held inventories to depreciate quickly based on market demand. Rather, companies have chosen to set up a contingency plan that is only active in the event of a possible black swan event. An example of this would be an emergency operations facility that could be quickly set up when necessary. Along with the cost of acquiring said facility, the company would also need to organize and prepare a group of highly educated and highly experienced staff to ensure operations continue reliably. However, acquiring a facility, organizing staff and operations, and paying a drastic increase in wages during possible emergency operations results in a lot of costs for businesses. Lean management has worked to eliminate such costs in the past because there is a large cost to businesses at a very low risk of being utilized. This struggle details a battle common in modern supply chain, which is balancing supply chain efficiency with supply chain resilience. Supply chain efficiency represents the ideals of lean management and maximizing bottom line profits. Adversely, supply chain resilience attempts to maximize long-term profits by maintaining a reliable supply chain, mitigating risks, and planning for possible future black swan events. The two fields both work to make improvements to supply chain. However, supply chain efficiency may not cause companies to prepare as well as supply chain resilience. As concerns regarding the prospect of black swan events and their increased prevalence continue to grow, management and supply chain have the dangerous task of balancing between an efficient approach and a resilient approach. Furthermore, companies have to do so while attempting to responsibly maximize their products and keep their investors happy. Secondly, we will be discussing how a black swan event affects members upstream of a supply chain. The effects of a black swan event will be similar throughout the upstream portion of the supply chain. So for this section, we will be focusing the changes in practice resulting from previous black swan events. Due to previous disasters with black swan events, companies have been forced to operate with much more risk management. One area we can clearly see this change is in the increase in transparency throughout many supply chains today. Aside from advances made in technology, Companies today demand more transparency throughout the members of their supply chain. For manufacturing companies, they need to not only know the quality of the materials they purchase, but exactly where the materials are coming from. Companies can use this information to better access the reliability of their suppliers and their goods. Without this information, a company could be blindsided by a future black swan event. Companies who operate lean are also threatened by the possibility of complications due to a possible black swan event. Although there are still companies who operate lean and use just-in-time manufacturing, like Toyota, however, they still have to spend extra money in setting up emergency plans. For smaller companies with much less revenue, they are not financially capable of setting up such emergency plans or facilities. Regardless of a company's size, the threat of future black swan events results in more costs incurred so a company can attempt to mitigate risks. The threat of black swan events has also resulted in forms of auditing between partner companies. Volkswagen and their buyers offer a great example following the scandal in 2015. Due to false engineering and reporting on the emissions system, it is likely that buyers may start not only requiring financial audits, but also requiring engineering audits. In the future, this trend would be beneficial for the long-term health of companies and their supply chains. However, short-term, these changes would result in costs incurred by these companies. Lastly, we will be discussing the supply chain downstream. In this section, we will be covering how a black swan event could affect retailers and end consumers. For retailers, much of the effects are similar to other members of the supply chain. Generally, a black swan event would result in a decrease in options for retailers to purchase goods, as well as a decrease in avenues to sell their goods. If a retailer's main supplier is unable to operate due to a black swan event, it is very likely that the retailer would have to either settle for lower quality goods or have to spend more to purchase the goods they need. This would then result in their products being repriced to deal with possible increases in costs or decreases in market demand. For end consumers, black swan events can severely limit the goods or services available. In the event of a major environmental disaster like Hurricane Katrina or the tsunami that hit Japan, local consumers were severely limited with the products and services in their area. Although those cases are extreme outliers, the concept of a black swan event is characterized by such conditions.
When it comes to current examples of the black swan event, there are many companies that everyday people would recognize. Others, they may not be as recognizable, but are an important part of the global economy and supply chain. When doing research on the black swan effect, the most recent companies going through the unpredictable hardship are Hanjin Shipping Company and Samsung Electronics. Hanjin is a South Korean shipping company and is one of the world's largest in its industry. Per World Finance, Hanjin is the 7th biggest container carrier in the world. Hanjin is currently undergoing bankruptcy. Therefore, all its vessels that are in transit cannot be docked in any port around the world. If they did, the products on the ships would be seized. This means that the product on the vessels cannot be delivered as planned and that the product will not reach its final destination, leaving many companies without materials or products to sell. This impact is what is seen in the industry as a black swan effect. In this case, rates for many shipping companies are rising. Capacity on the other shipping companies' vessels are going to reach its max. Cargo, which is worth near $14 billion, is also stranded at sea on Hanjin vessels, and other effects within the shipping industry that will be unpredictable. Another company that is undergoing what is known as the black swan effect is Samsung. Samsung is a South Korean-based company who is also going through this effect. They are not only having issues with product being stuck on vessels in the middle of the ocean, but they also have issues with the Galaxy device and new washing machines that are both causing massive recalls. These are two major blows for Samsung and their shareholders, and the impact can be seen throughout the company and its stock. Imagine how the company rearranged shipments and even said it would consider chartering as many as 16 cargo planes to fulfill all of its shipments and contracts. And these devices turn out to have a major flaw, causing worldwide recalls. Both these recalls are unpredictable expenses for Samsung, causing its shares to drop significantly. These such instances are what companies try to avoid, but in many cases cannot, giving the meaning to the term Black Swan event.
What is the ILWU? The International Longshore and Warehouse Union is a labor union which primarily represents dock workers on the west coast of the United States, Hawaii, and Alaska, and in British Columbia, also in Canada. During this section, we're going to discuss how does the ILWU affect supply chain. We will cover sections about the global supply chain shifts, a boon for air freight business, a major delay industry-wide, and the loss of profits for shippers. First, we must identify the problem. So, what is the root of the problem? The root of the problem is that the Pacific Maritime Association, known as PMA, and the International Longshoremen Warehouse Union, ILWU, have been operating without a contract since the end of June 2014. To better understand what the Pacific Maritime Association, known as the PMA, is, let's get some background on it. It is a nonprofit organization based in San Francisco, California, which represents employers for the shipping industry on the Pacific coast. The Pacific Maritime Association was founded in 1949. It is a nonprofit corporation. The principal business of the PMA is to negotiate and administer labor agreements with the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, known as the ILWU. About 80 to 90% of all international traffic moves by ocean due to pricing. During the summer of 2015, the contract expired between the ports and the warehousing union. During this time, they were at the negotiation table, and what was going on is that the ports are trying to become more efficient, but the union needs to maintain the positions so that there are no firings during this time, but at the same time, there aren't any hirings as people retired. As the negotiations progressed and did not come forward with a reasonable concession from either sides, workers started to do a slowdown. However, it was not a strike. Towards the fall of 2015, there was still no contract, and the inventory of containers at the ports kept building up. They weren't moving onto trains, and they weren't moving off vessels. Usually a ship would come onto Los Angeles or Long Beach. That's the largest port in the United States, as we can see in this map. All of these terminals were slowing down dramatically, that nothing was moving. Normally ships go straight to the docks. However, because of this slowdown, ships started queuing. Things got so bad that there were 20 ships in line just to unload. It usually takes approximately 1 day to unload a vessel onto the docks. But because of the slowdown, they were taking anywhere from 5 to 7 days to unload one ship. In addition, as the ships unloaded, the containers were not moving on rail or onto truck chassis. Because they weren't moving at all, they were just being unloaded onto the dock floor. As time progressed, stacks and stacks of container were just set at the docks, and all the new stuff kept burying the old stuff underneath. Normally, during normal operations, we only see about 1 to 2 stack high of containers. Because of this slowdown, we were seeing anywhere from 6 to 8 to even 9 stack high container towers. For the companies whose supply was buried deep under the stacks of containers, they were forced to air freight dramatic amounts of quantities. Dramatic amounts to fulfill anywhere from retail space to the automotive industry. Most of this product like clothing and automotive parts moves by ocean due to the pricing. However, due to this crisis, private charters were being paid for that rent costs over $1 million per flight. The demand to move freight skyrocketed. That prices went from $3 a kilo to $12 a kilo. However, due to the need of all this product to move, companies had no choice but to start over. So now, not only is a crisis occurring on the ocean side, we are starting to see a problem building up on the air side. Picture this. O'Hare Airport, one of the largest cargo aircraft in the world, was extremely backed up due to this crisis. They could not keep track of it. They could not keep track of all the cargo and all the product. Freight was getting lost on paper because there wasn't enough manpower to manage the surplus of air freight. So not only are we seeing a delay in ocean freight, but now we're starting to see a delay in air freight due to the vast amounts of air freight the companies were chartering and booking. Companies needed to fulfill orders to large retailers such as Walmart, Amazon, Target, and if orders could not be fulfilled, contracts would be lost, and so would shelf space. In order to fulfill these contracts, companies were chartering air freight prepaid, starting at $700,000 to $1.2 million to move massive amounts of product. These companies needed to move these large amounts of products because they were lost during the slowdown at the ILWU dock. These companies had no choice due to production to fulfill. Production could not be stopped, so companies had to spend millions up front to keep production running. The contracts between ILWU and the PMA usually takes anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to come to an agreement. It is predictable that an end to a contract is coming. However, the time frame that the agreement took was not predicted. Thus, in theory, we can conclude that the timing that it took for the contract to come to an agreement could be labeled as a black swan effect.
Companies which have been struck by black swan events often struggle because they have a difficult time making good decisions as the event unfolds. Even the most prepared and well-run organizations can find themselves in this situation. Managing a black swan event is not simply about helping the company regroup and survive its devastating consequences. It is more about facing the event and making the best of the situation so the company will emerge better and stronger than they were prior to the event. The following strategies have shown to be important to successfully managing a black swan event. The first is to use survival psychology to counteract shock. According to a study in 2009 done by Aon Corporation, a risk management business, companies showed success during a black swan event when they maintained a focused attitude in a stressful environment. When a black swan hits, it is paramount for company leadership to take emotion out of the equation and focus on the problem. Proven strategies to accomplish this include focusing on accurate, factual, and objective data, expanding access to external resources to give breathing room to leadership and internal resources, and free up capacity to run day-to-day operations. Leadership should break the situation down into manageable components for tactical response. The second solution is to assemble a black swan response team. Multidisciplinary capability is absolutely critical in most black swan events. Success depends on coordination, collaboration, focus, depth, access to information, ability to think outside the box, and an ability to effectively communicate. A team can enhance access to critical multidisciplinary capability and scalability of the black swan event. The third solution is to improve risk agility. When a black swan strikes, senior management needs to be able to react quickly, not just implement and monitor. They need accurate information and access to tools and analytics in order to discern if responses work or not. If one option fails, they should be able to change course promptly. The fourth solution is to optimize communications. The company should pay attention to how communication is presented. When a black swan hits, risk managers should make sure that data are converted into business intelligence with proper context, supporting evidence, and measurable results. The company should utilize technology to help accelerate the information gathering process and merge it for analysis and for the creation of meaningful reports with measurable results.
The bittersweet fact of a black swan event is that it will occur, no matter what. Firms need to plan for the worst and lessen the impact of a black swan event. They also need to concentrate more on the unknowns and less on the usual. With proper communication, black swan effects can be mitigated.